As a police officer with 30 years of experience, I can boast that I have seen many strange things, but none of them were as strange as the story I am about to tell. I am Detective Inspector Ray Miller, and this case happened shortly before I retired. It was late in the evening, and the three of us were sitting reviewing cases to make sure we hadn't missed anything important. We did this from time to time to make sure we didn't overlook anything. We were discussing a recent case involving an unidentified man who had been found floating in the Thames. We had been unable to establish his identity or where he had been killed before being thrown into the water. "Sir, Sergeant Barry is asking for you at this address. He said something about 3 dead men." I thanked the constable and headed to the address with one of my team members. When we arrived, a constable was standing at the door. "Upstairs, sir. 2nd room on the right." The house was empty, with no furniture or carpets in the rooms. "Derek, find out who owns this house," I asked my partner, Detective Sergeant Derek Cairns. The scene of crime officer, SOCO, was standing in the doorway upstairs. "Good evening, Ray. You've got a very strange case today." We entered the room and saw 3 naked men, each tied to the floor with their arms and legs spread out like a starfish. There was a slightly musty smell in the room. "Oh, great. A triple murder. Just what I need. What can you tell me, Sid?" I asked the SOCO. 3 men, all around 30 years old, each tied up and gagged with duct tape. Other than that, nothing out of the ordinary. No visible signs of trauma, but all 3 are clearly dead. "Poisoned or killed somewhere else?" I asked. "Possibly poisoned. My estimate is that they all died about 12 to 15 hours ago, but how they died remains a mystery. Hopefully the autopsy will shed some light on the situation." "Any idea who they are?" "No, not the slightest. No clothes, no documents, just 3 bodies in an empty house." "All right. Seal them up and let's see if the autopsy clarifies the cause of death." "Sir, the owner of the house is here," my colleague shouted from the upper floor. I went downstairs where Detective Cairns was talking to a small man. "This man, Mr. Gerald Price, is the owner of the house, sir. He says the house has been empty for just over a month since the last tenant moved out." The man shifted nervously from foot to foot, looking at me. The last tenant was an elderly lady who kept cats and had health problems. Her family put her in a nursing home. The furniture and carpets were infested with fleas, so I threw everything out 2 weeks ago. I was going to clean the house and rent it out. I came here earlier to make a list of things for the repairman. "So no one has been living here, and you have the keys, correct?" "Yes, I have a set of keys. The rental agent has another set." "Are there any other keys, Mr. Price? It doesn't look like anyone broke the door to get in." "Not that I know of, Inspector." I told Mr. Price he could go into the house when we were done with our investigation. I knew it wouldn't take long since we didn't have any leads. The rope used to tie the men was widely available at many hardware stores, as was the duct tape. Detective Cairns and I returned to the police station. The rest of the shift passed without incident. A few days later, we identified the men: James Cartwright, 35, Neil Barnes, 35, and David Wallace, 34. All 3 worked for the same company, Foster Consulting. The company's owner, Brian Foster, was in shock. He couldn't think of a single reason why these men might have been killed. We spoke to several of their colleagues, who said much the same thing. As I was leaving the company's office, the secretary said she needed to talk to me, but not there. We agreed to meet that evening at a nearby cafe. When I walked in, I saw her sitting alone in the far corner of the cafe. "I'm sorry I dragged you here, but I didn't want to talk at the office." "Are you all right, miss?" "Andrews, Debbie Andrews. I'm an investigator, and I know that many people lied to you today, especially the company owner, Mr. Foster. Those 3 men worked for him for almost 5 years. Everyone knew that they had intimate relationships with their immediate boss, Karen Lannister. Foster didn't tell you because he was sleeping with her, too. Karen quit a little over a year ago to stay home after her husband got a promotion. I think they didn't need her salary anymore." So you think Karen Lannister could have done this? I asked. No, I don't think so. I think it could have been her husband. I know he found out about her affair with Foster, but I'm not sure if he knew about the other three men. The company lost several clients, which resulted in some employees being laid off, mostly junior staff and a few managers. Karen slept with all three men if they met their monthly quota, which meant she slept with Foster to get a decent bonus every year. What Debbie Andrews told me was interesting, and I asked why Foster had lied to me earlier that day. Probably because he doesn't want his wife to find out. If she does, she'll divorce him, and they have 4 children and a big, beautiful house. A divorce would destroy him, Debbie replied. I thanked Miss Andrews for her time and returned to the police station. Since it was late, I decided to go home and go to bed. I received a message asking me to call in the morning and stop by the medical examiner's office. Good morning, Sid. What do you have for me? Ah, good morning, Ray. Your 3 corpses, they all died from fresh air. Sorry, say that again. They all died from fresh air. In other words, they were all injected with an air bubble and died of cardiac arrest. The injection was made in the groin, so I didn't notice it at the crime scene. Ray sighed. Great. I have 3 dead bodies and no suspects. The only difference was that one of the men had a sexually transmitted disease. I think he had recently been on antibiotics. Thanks, Sid. Send me a report as soon as you can. I called the station to let them know I'd be in later and decided to drive to Karen Lannister's house. I stopped at the house and prayed that Mr. Lannister wasn't home. My first conversation with his wife would be awkward, and it would probably be better if he wasn't around. Mrs. Lannister opened the door, allowing me to introduce myself, and once inside I explained to her about the 3 men who had been killed and why I was there. Mrs. Lannister, I understand you were associated with your former boss, Brian Foster. Would you mind if I asked if you had any relationship with the 3 men who were killed? Karen Lannister lowered her eyes for a moment. Yes, Inspector. I slept with all 3 of them, as well as Brian Foster. I'm not proud of what I did, but I had my reasons. Does your husband know about this? Terry found out that I slept with Brian. We talked, and I promised I would never do it again. When I found out I was pregnant, I quit my job so I wouldn't have to go back after the baby was born. My husband knew nothing about my unusual relationships with David, James, and Neil, and I would prefer that he never find out. I can't guarantee that, Mrs. Lannister. If it becomes evidence, I won't be able to hide it, but for now, I'm willing to keep it from him. Just remember that if it gets in the papers, they'll write that these 3 men worked together and your husband may figure it out. Can you tell me where your husband was 3 nights ago? In Switzerland, where he's been for a week. Terry went on business and won't be back until tomorrow evening. May I ask where you were that night? I was here, at home. My parents came to visit my grandson James and keep me company in the evening. I handed Karen Lannister my business card. If you suddenly remember anyone who might have had a motive for killing these 3 men, please call me. I left the Lannister home, almost certain that Mrs. Lannister was not the person we were looking for, but I wasn't so sure about her husband. Back at the station, I discussed the case with Detective Kearns and Detective Constable Pete Wheatley. So you think it was the husband, sir? I did at first, but now I don't see how he could have done it, because he was in Zurich on the night of the murders. At this point, I have 5 people confirming his alibi. You 2 start checking out Mr. and Mrs. Lannister. Check them both. Finances, family, everything you can find. I'll go talk to Brian Foster. As I sat talking to Foster, I realized that this man was an arrogant jerk. Since he was the owner of the company, he gave the impression of being above everyone else. When I told him that his affair with Karen Lannister could become public knowledge, he quickly calmed down. Inspector, I can't let my wife find out about Karen and me. I won't tell her, sir, but this case will undoubtedly attract media attention. If the press finds out about this, I won't be able to stop them from printing anything unless it damages the case. I'll help in any way I can. But rest assured, I won't do anything that would allow my wife to find out about my relationship with Karen. I know she had some kind of arrangement with the 3 victims, but I didn't interfere because I was getting what I wanted. Besides, their sales figures were sky high almost every month, so I had no personal or business reason to interfere in their affairs. Foster shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I understand that one of the victims was married? Yes. Neil was married. I think his wife is expecting their first child. If you think of anything that might help us catch the men who killed these 3 men, give me a call. I handed Foster my business card. I decided to call it a day and go home, hoping to spend some time with my wife, Jean, for a change. Sitting with Jean, I realized I couldn't wait to retire. We had planned to spend some time traveling in Europe. I suggested we move out of London and find a quiet place, but Jean wouldn't hear of it. No, Ray, I want to stay here. Most of our friends live nearby and our daughter lives 30 minutes away. I'm sorry, but I'm not ready to move. Okay, Jean. It was just a suggestion. I smiled. Okay, let's go to bed. I'll show you what I've been hiding if you mention moving again. Jean laughed and went upstairs. The next day at the station, I talked to my colleagues, and there were no signs that Karen or Terry Lannister were involved. Later, as I was driving home, I got a call from dispatch. Sir, I've been asked to inform you of a fatal accident. Oh, God, put me through to the traffic police. Sir, you've been specifically requested. It appears that the deceased is Mr. Brian Foster. I called Jean to tell her I'd be late, turned the car around, and headed for the accident site. I pulled up to the scene and Derek Kearns was already there. What do we have, Derek? 1 badly damaged car and the body of Brian Foster. Was it an accident? We have to assume so. A couple walking their dog saw what happened. Foster was being followed by a large white car, which suddenly pulled up alongside him and crashed into him. His car was thrown off the road, rolled over several times, and ended up in a ditch. The white car drove away. It was too far away to see the license plate. Okay. Did the traffic police say anything? They asked dispatch to check the surveillance cameras in the direction the car drove off, but other than that, we have nothing. Okay. Listen, get a copy of the witness statement and call it a day. I'm heading home. See you in the morning. I turned to my car. This case was starting to bother me. I had 4 dead bodies and no suspects, except Terry Lannister, who had a perfect alibi so far. I told Jean I'd be late. I decided to call the Lannisters and stop by their house that evening. When I pulled up to the house, I noticed the lights were on downstairs. I knocked on the door and stepped back. Karen Lannister opened the door. Yes. Oh, Inspector, it's you. Please come in. Thank you, Mrs. Lannister. Is your husband home? No, Terry's in Paris. Does your husband travel a lot, Mrs. Lannister? Yes, or rather, he did. This trip will be his last for a while. Terry was working on a promotion, and starting tomorrow when he gets back, he'll be working in the office. I take it that's what you both wanted? Yes, it is. We have 1 child and are planning to have another soon. My husband didn't want to be traveling all the time and miss out on our child growing up. You said your husband is in Paris? Yes, he flew out this morning and will be back tomorrow afternoon. Is something wrong? I'm very sorry to inform you that your former employer, Brian Foster, was killed last night. Karen Lannister was clearly shaken by the news. How? What happened? All I can say at this point is that there was a collision between 2 cars. Mr. Foster died from his injuries. The other driver fled the scene at high speed. And you think my husband could have been the other driver? Yes, Mrs. Lannister. Yes. Yes, I wanted to. But I couldn't think of anything that wouldn't land me in jail. I could have told Foster's wife, but then she and their children would have suffered the most if they got divorced. As for the others, I don't know anything about them except their names. If you're asking me if I killed them, Inspector, my answer is no. But you wanted revenge, didn't you? After all those men slept with your wife. As I said, I wanted revenge, but not at the cost of going to prison. After finishing the interrogation, I came to the conclusion that Terry Lannister was definitely not the murderer of his wife's lovers. Who was it then? I had no idea and no solid leads. On the day I retired, the case remained unsolved and would most likely have been filed away in the cold case files. In the end, I decided to forget about it, retire, and forget about the mess. Jean and I spent 2 months traveling around Europe. And when we returned, I got a job as head of security at a commercial bank. The salary and benefits allowed me to retire at 60. Like most police officers, I kept in touch with a few old colleagues. We mostly got together to drink or play golf. I had been retired for just over 2 years when Derek Kearns told me they knew who had killed Foster and the 3 other men. I eagerly awaited his news. It turns out that when Terry Lannister was a young man, he saved his neighbor's cousin from drowning in a local river. The man he saved, a certain Martin Wilson, never forgot it. At the time, no one knew that Wilson worked for Foster's consulting firm. And when he found out about Karen and realized she was the wife of the man who saved him from drowning, he decided to take justice into his own hands. Neither Terry nor Karen Lannister knew about this. Are you sure about that? Absolutely. Wilson found out he had an inoperable brain tumor, and before the disease defeated him, he took revenge on Terry Lannister by killing his wife's lovers. A few days before he died, he called me and told me to come to the hospital immediately. When I arrived, he explained who he was and what he had done. We'll never be able to bring him to justice because he died a few days later. Damn. Do the Lannisters know about this? The chief of police told me not to tell them, that it was better to keep quiet and just close the case. Probably best, Derek. Thanks for telling me. I continued working until I finally retired at the age of 60. I saw the Lannisters a few months after Derek told me the news. I didn't talk to them, but we nodded to each other in greeting. They had 2 children with them, so it seemed they had put their problems behind them. Personally, if my wife had done that to me, I would have divorced her, regardless of whether we had children or not.